Hi, I'm Rick Gonzalez, and this is my presentation on enhancing communication. This presentation is designed for the elite performer. Now, who's the elite performer? We're going to reference the elite performer as somebody who is in the top of their field. They are dedicated to their craft and they spend most of their time on activities to improve. This is the person who has mastered most of the fundamentals, and most of the things they add to their training repertoire will have just a marginal influence. So when they're adding in strength or nutrition or a technique, it's going to have a marginal influence because they've already mastered a lot of those fundamentals. The elite performer can be in any domain. It can be the professional. It can be the amateur. It can be the Olympian, the age group winner at a local race. But essentially, it's what we've mentioned above, right? Top in the field, dedicated, spend most time on activity. Um, Now, why is this presentation geared towards the elite performer? Well, because the elite performer is mostly responsible for every aspect and facet of their performance. They are responsible, whereas the junior performer may rely a little bit more on the coaches for technique or the other aspects, maybe the strength coach to get them to a level that they can actually play um, or anything else like that. So they might rely a little bit more on the support staff, whereas the elite performer needs to be 100% responsible. And they also need to be somewhat autonomous. The elite performer needs to be aware enough. They need to be aware of what works and what doesn't work. They need to be aware of who they can trust to bring into their training and who they cannot trust and who just doesn't work out for them. Um, Now, don't get me wrong, the coaching staff is extremely important. The elite performer may rely um, on the assistance of many different people in their training cadre, coaches, nutritionists, physical trainers, physical therapists, medical staff. But they need to be responsible to understand, what are the elements there that are making them work? Is there something in that chain of people that are decreasing performance? Um, Now, coaches of elite performers can benefit from enhancing communication as well. So if you're a coach and you're watching this presentation, everything's gonna be relevant to you, but this is geared towards elite performer because of the nature of being elite. Now, what's in it for me? You're probably asking, you know, one of the things you often hear is when an athlete is stagnant or unsuccessful was that they had miscommunication or that communication broke down. You don't often hear when communication is going really well. You do hear it sometimes like, well, we're communicating really well, so that's why we were successful. You mostly hear it when it breaks down. Um, Now, communication is an extremely broad term, and hopefully this presentation will help the performer understand the broad context of communication, the different types of communication, and how to improve. So that's going to be key here. Remember, how to improve your communication. And to improve your communication, you have to understand the elements. And I'm going to just leave you with this right here. So this is a Gonzo doll. I want you to think of communication as threads that hold the pieces together. When it's put together, no one thinks about the thread, right? It's nice and sturdy. Everything holds up. But as soon as the thread starts to unravel, the doll comes apart. So when you think of communication, just keep that in mind that it's the thread that holds all of the aspects, the athlete and coach relationship, the training relationship, the athlete's recovery. All of that is reliant on the thread of communication. Now, what is communication? Simply put, it's sending and receiving information. To get a little bit more complex, we have to understand that signals that are sent and received from each person must pass through a personal filter. So as you look in the image right there, those people speaking to the cans, just imagine that each person has either a lens in front of their face or there's a filter in front of those cans. So to get more complex, we each have our own filters based on our history, some of our experiences, our culture. Those are the elements that's going to change the message slightly between sending and receiving information. So good communication is like information is sent and someone receives the information and they can act upon it. Bad communication is when the information is not sent properly or the receiver just didn't understand. So you could send the best message in the world, but if your audience is foreign speaking, then you are not communicating your message effectively. For a simplistic example, good communication is like a stop sign. It's red, hexagon, it says STOP. It sends a very clear universal message for the driver to stop. If you're colorblind, it still has the shape and the letters. If you can't read the language, you could still see the shape and the color. So bad communication would be kind of like the branch covering the sign, so it can't send the information out, so the person doesn't know it's there. Or if the receiver is extremely alien and they have no prior knowledge of stop signs. So those are two examples of miscommunication or bad communication. Now, there's internal and external communication. In internal communication, it's sending and receiving signals between your body and mind. Your body and mind are constantly sending signals to each other. Many of those signals are involuntary. You don't even think about them. Some of them are voluntary. Some of them, your mind makes a decision on how to interpret that information. For example, if you get beamed with a baseball, there's going to be a pain signal sent to your brain, and you may interpret that pain differently than someone else. Someone may interpret that like, oh no, I just broke my arm, and someone else might say, well, it's just a bruise, I'll be fine. And that's going to be based on context. Internal communication could be when your legs burn on a run or a bike ride, and how your mind interprets that pain. And can your mind make that pain go away? And we'll kind of address that just a little bit later on. Now, if anyone remembers Vision Quest, I love this example of Luden Swain, who drops weight, climbs a pegboard, and beats a 3-time state champion. Very realistic movie in the 80s. But I love this image because it shows him overcoming physical pain with the decision to keep going. So that was kind of cool. External communication. This could be peer-to-peer, coach to athlete, athlete to coach, athlete to anybody on the support staff. And I put medical on there because I think it's important. A lot of times medical personnel will speak to athletes maybe in medical jargon, and the athlete may think it's time to, or they may think it's time to play when they should be resting. Or worse, the medical staff might imply certain things, and the athlete doesn't interpret it well enough, and they think their career is over. Sometimes the athlete's communicating, if you're playing a sport with an opponent, often the athlete will communicate information to their opponent and vice versa. There's overt and subtle communication. Overt communication is sending information that everyone can hear. Hey, go over there, right? This can be helpful in stressful or loud environments, right? You want to be very overt. Subtle communication is sending information that the other person receives without knowing. So I want you to think of subtle communication as a catcher telling a pitcher what to do, right? He gives the signal, the pitcher receives it, he nods, yes, I want to do that one, or no, I don't want to do it. And overt communication is like the first base coach telling the runner to run. There's explicit and implicit communication. Explicit communication is very direct. It's saying exactly what needs to happen. It's if someone asked, or if somebody said, hey, make a left at the light. Okay, that's an example of explicit communication. It's go over there. Implicit communication is one that's applied, so it's less direct. For example, if someone asked, hey, do I make a left at this light or the next light? Implicit communication would respond with, well, it's not this light, right? So it's implied that my next stop is the one. In situations where you might think that, I should always use implicit, we all hate implicit in communication. That's not necessarily the case. In situations where implicit communication is extremely important are situations where one reacts based on the actions of someone else. So in baseball, a shortstop may take over second base when the second baseman is involved in a double play. So the shortstop will run up and take that spot. When the ball is in the air, the athlete that's closest to the ball may reach up with his glove in the air. He may run toward the ball. That's implied that he's the one who's going to attempt to catch that. If someone else doesn't receive that information, obviously you're going to have two people going for the same ball. There's verbal and nonverbal communication. In verbal communication, a message can be affected by tone, volume, inflection, and pacing. I might inflect a word to emphasize its meaning or its value. I might increase my voice if it's loud, or if I want you to act immediately. Like if I want you to go faster. I might say it louder. I might slow down my pacing if I really want you to listen. Or maybe the environment's really stressful and I need to slow it down a little bit. So, verbal communication, how you present your information, is extremely important. Nonverbal communication can include body language and facial language. If I were going to communicate anger, right, you'd see it on my face, you'd see it on my body. Most of us, can understand some basic, anger, sadness, fear, surprise. We can understand these things, and we have this intuitive ability to see this because we've seen it before. We've been in those situations. Sometimes your emotions, or if you're fatigued, they can be read by your body language, right? You see somebody who is really tired. You're playing a game of football and you see your opponent, it looks really tired, it looks really winded, their hands are on their knees, they're giving all the signals of being really tired, right? You're communicating a message to your opponent that you are tired. Body movements can be interpreted, right? You might point somewhere, you might tell somebody, go over there. You don't even have to say it. This is nonverbal. It can be a little more subtle, right? It can be, it can be, if you ask me a question, right, I might shrug. Even something as simple as the gestures you make. If you're in a car and you ask somebody to do this, I haven't seen a car with a roll down window in years, but everybody knows it. Everybody knows that this is universal for roll down your window. But our body movements communicate a message to other people all the time. We can use tools to help us communicate, right? We have now some athletes have two-way radios in their helmets. There are flags, smoke signals, right? Depends on what performance you're at. If you're in a jet, there are people on the flight line that are communicating message where to go using flags, using hand signals. It might be a good way to basically keep sound out of the equation. If you're trying to be quiet, you could use a tool, a marker. Now, how to improve your communication? Awareness. All types of communication to enhance, to improve your communication starts with awareness. Awareness of what type of communication is required for your area, right? If it's in training, what kind of communication? Do you need to be very overt and very direct, very explicit to everybody around you? If it's a field of play, do you need to be a little more subtle? Do you need to have more nonverbal communication? So having that awareness is going to be extremely important for you to communicate with yourself internally, with your peers or your teammates, your coaching staff, your supporting staff, supporting others, everybody. So awareness of what type of communication is required and where you are at is extremely important. Now, when we're talking about internal communication, we talked about that body awareness. How your body responds to pain and injury. As an elite performer, you most likely experience both pain and injury. So having a good understanding of that contextual knowledge can help you be a little more aware of, is this something that I need to stop and recover or relax? I need to stop before I might injure myself? Or is this something that I can push through? And one of the ways to help you push through could be through the use of positive self-talk. You might tell yourself through stressful situations when your legs are burning, keep going, keep going, keep going. If we're talking about all the others, external, verbal, explicit, implicit, and subtle, once again, awareness of self is extremely important. What do I need? What type of communication is required? But also the external factors. Is it loud? Is it quiet? Do I need to worry about my opponent reading my signs? Who do I need to send this message to? Who do I make sure the message stays with me? You need to make sure the message is clear and concise. You'll communicate a lot more effectively if the message, even if you're doing subtle and body language, you need to make sure that your message is extremely clear and concise. And you have to know the message that you want to relay. Now, if you're receiving signals, they're more effective if you're observing, listening, and repeating. Remember, you're receiving information from your own personal lens, so you need to make sure that your signal that the signal you received is exactly the one that was sent. So sometimes you have to repeat the information. So you listen to somebody speak, or you're observing something and you're seeing it, and sometimes you have to repeat it. Now, finally, review. In order to enhance communication, you need to be aware of your thoughts and feelings. Once you understand this, you need to actually send your signal. Now, oftentimes an athlete won't explicitly, they'll have a problem, but they won't say anything. So by internalizing it, sometimes they let out body language that is not their intention, and the coach may not understand, and they may do more of what they shouldn't be doing. So if you are having those communication issues, if your signal was not received, was it implicit when it should have been explicit? Was it subtle when it should have been overt? If your signal is not understood, was it clear and concise? If you don't understand a message, are you observing and listening? And if you've done all the above and communication is still a problem, it's probably time to move on. If it's a teammate and these issues still persist, you've done everything you could to enhance or improve communication, and the ball's in their court. So hopefully this presentation will help you enhance your communication. Thank you.